we give over all our power if we keep outsourcing why we feel what we feel. Yes, something happened. It was an antecedent, if we want to break it down in CBT language, an antecedent, and then I felt something. So then my natural reaction is to go, well, you made me feel that.
Right.
Well, the antecedent happened, and there was a human being behind that probably, but there's a space between the antecedent and my emotional state. And there is part of us that allows ourselves to step into a feeling or to have that feeling come upon us or well up within us. And again, that sounds so clinical and so cold, but I want to reframe that as it's where we really can be empowered in our own emotional wellness.
Welcome to Love and Life. I'm Dr. Karen Anderson Abril here with my co-host,
Pastor Elliott Anderson.
And Love and Life is your place to hear conversations grounded in psych research, psychotherapy,
and biblical truth
to help us thrive in love and life.
Hey, Elliott, we had a really lovely response from the listener who posed the question about being newly married and parents wanting to be very involved, and also a husband wanting to have some protection of the marital union and making decisions about when to join in family events and activities and not feeling obligated all the time. And just those totally normal transitions as we go from single person, single adult daughter in a family context to married adult daughter. Absolutely. And how different that is. And it was really lovely. We got feedback from the listener right away that we had really hit exactly kind of where her heart was with that question. And she found it very affirming of kind of where her heart was telling her she needed to move in this context and in this scenario, as far as redefining roles and honoring her husband, knowing that that's her primary role, and then still can be a loving and committed and connected adult daughter. But it's going to take a little bit of movement of the dance steps that we talk about in family systems, the dance that we come to and then have to move those steps. Yeah. And I hope that analogy tracks for people. We're just talking about just subtle movement sometimes can make quite a big difference, an important difference. And so we got some nice feedback. Tim, she was willing to let us share her feedback with the Love and Life family. So do you mind just going ahead and reading that real quickly?
Yeah, let me read that.
Thanks.
It says, just finished listening to the podcast and wow, you two truly nailed it spot on. I am the younger sibling between me and my sister, and he is the oldest. One thing you two really sparked was that my parents are struggling themselves, and I never thought of that in the way you presented it, with them always putting us first and how, now that we are grown, they feel that loss. I know that they are only ones that can help themselves, but I can't help but feel that we bring them happiness, and when we say no to things, it hurts them, which then brings guilt over me. We have currently said no to a few things they invited us to do, and I feel they are starting to think my husband is the one pushing us away. I have prayed over this, and I have truly felt your podcast affirm my position and was a sign from God that I am doing the right thing for my husband and I. This is what I needed to hear. Thank you both for the advice and encouragement through this. The wisdom and knowledge from you two is amazing. Bravo. That was me. I added that.
And a bravo. Yeah. Thanks, Dad.
That's my dad.
And there's something, Karen, I heard in there, if I can speak something. Thank you, listener, for your feedback. And I'm so glad we were fairly accurate in our immediacy of assessment and analysis. That's affirming because Karen and I are very sensitive to not speaking too much into something when we don't have enough facts.
Right.
But we also heard a lot of stuff experientially that made us think about birth order. And then Karen really zeroed in on the parents likely having struggles from their adjustment and change as well. And the area that I want to speak about quickly there is that she talked about, we know we hurt them when we have our boundaries. And sounds like she's on a good front page with her husband about that boundary and about some of the no's that they need to say. And then we have that codependency feeling like, well, we don't want our parents to be sad, or we don't want them to go through that. And if we get caught pleasing in those scenarios, then the inauthenticity you talked about, Karen, will sink in there. So it's good to hear that we were in the right framework. It gave her some help and some advice and some thoughts. It makes me want to move into my next area, but I wanted to give you room first to respond to her response as well.
Well, one thing that stood out to me that's related to what you're saying is that she said, my parents have always put the kids first, meaning her and her sister. And I think that's something just to underscore here, that we've talked about it extensively, but again, I think it bears repeating that in family systems theory and therapy, we talk about the marital subsystem really needs to be at the top of the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, typically the husband and wife are also mother and father. So, but those are two different subsystems. The marital is their marriage and their marital dynamic, and then the parental. And yes, they're occupying both roles, and it's so common and so easy to slip into putting the parental subsystem in a hierarchy above the marital. And this is a very concrete example of what happens then, because if she's correct, and she probably is, that her parents have over the years, from her child to adult child eyes, seeing mom and dad kind of put us first, the kids first, then there may have been some neglect in the marital subsystem and some nurturing, some attention to the spouse and the spousal role. And that's so common. So this is not trying to condemn anyone or to be critical. It's just so common because kids take up all kinds of time and energy and they're needy the way your spouse isn't needy. However, we do need to make sure that we are paying attention to the husband, to the wife. And so when we don't do that, look at what can happen. Then the kids feel, like you said, some codependency kicks in. The kids feel an obligation to make mom and dad happy, when really, especially during this family life cycle transition of kids being launched, we got a new grandbaby with her sister, and then with her now stepping into her marriage. And that transition is, as we talked about last episode, is going to be tricky anyway.
Yes.
But it's going to be harder on everyone if the parents have not recognized, whoa, if we have let our marital subsystem, our attention and our nurturing of that role, if we've let that slide a little bit, it's putting undue pressure on our kids as they're trying to launch.
Yeah, and when the system puts improper order, even if done in a loving way, it can make us then as adults, or not make us, it can lend us towards doing the same. Not only the same with our own kids maybe, but then also going up and saying, well, now I need to take care of mom and dad as much as they took care of me, even if it doesn't help me and my husband stay on the same page. So just identifying her awareness, I think it's appropriate. I think she is going to make those subtle but important changes to move forward.
A few years ago, I started having trouble falling asleep, and I started taking melatonin because I thought it was a natural way to try to relax myself, calm myself down, and go to sleep. But it turns out that as a hormone supplement, melatonin can disrupt our other hormones, and we can build up an immunity to it. So when we started partnering with the wellness company, I was super excited to try their melatonin-free sleep aid called Restful Sleep. It includes passion flower, chamomile, valerian root, among other herbs, and natural ways to help calm us down and get us ready to go to bed. I've been using it for a couple months now, and Restful Sleep helps my mind and body quiet themselves and ease into sleep. If you've ever had insomnia, you know how brutal it is. The wellness company's Restful Sleep can help. Head over to twc.health/lovelife and enter promo code LOVELIFE at checkout for 15% off your entire order. That's twc.health/lovelife and promo code LOVELIFE for 15% off your entire order.
The last part I wanted to share about her statement goes right into what I wanted to talk about today, which is like victim codependency phrases and the power of the words again over ourselves, or on ourselves, or through ourselves, and all that we know. And we talked about some in the neurology from Dr. Leaf and Bessel, and that we've talked about previously, that the words we say to ourselves does impact our body, not just our thinking and our soul, and can affect illness and sickness and cancer. I'm not being over dramatic. The more they research and understand, the more these words. And so these phrases, and she said that the guilt is like comes upon her, like somehow like there's guilt going through the computer or through the phone and comes upon her simply because she's having the boundary And that's one of the phrases I want to talk about. We do this all the time, but we say, he or she just makes me so angry.
Mm-hmm.
No one makes us angry. No one makes us sad. We feel sad. We respond to something that creates that within us, but no one can make us. And I know we could argue the semantic there. And sometimes it's hard not to respond to something that's dramatically difficult and terrible, and someone misbehaves and mistreats us. We can say in a cordial, understandable way in society, no one's going to think differently. When your husband is demeaning and mean and hurts you, that we say, he makes me so sad. No one's going to challenge that. Mm-hmm. But it's really important for us in our own self-agency not to think that we don't have control over our own emotions, our own responses.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting ready to go off on a tangent, but I can see your eyes. You're ready to jump in and get a little action here.
Well, that's me all day long. Even before I fully understood, even at Judson, where I was learning about the different psychological and therapeutic orientations, I was learning about that, but I hadn't fully embraced them the way I did once I got to Wheaton, and I'm getting my master's in clinical psych. So I'm doing an entire semester on Rogerian, an entire semester on cognitive behavioral. Even at Judson, I remember having those kind of, and I think now there's a lot of movement in the Stoicism. Have you heard of that kind of, and I don't know if it's from TikTok or whatever, but it's a philosophy of way of being that says exactly what you're saying. You have to own and take responsibility. And I'm going to butcher this because I'm not well versed in Stoicism. I just know when people have sent me something here or there saying that it's kind of a Stoic take on ABCD, I'm like, oh yeah, that's very CBT also. It's very Ellis. It's irrational to blame everyone else for what's going on in my internal emotional state. But it takes a lot of discipline. And also it can come off, Elliott, and I know you're going to receive pushback on this, and we both will. Like you said, someone who's been abused or cheated on, or anything that just a reasonable emotional response would be to feel. And so we're not saying that it's not rational and reasonable to feel these emotions as a response, but we give over all our power if we keep outsourcing why we feel what we feel. Yes, something happened. It was an antecedent, if we want to break it down in CBT language, an antecedent, and then I felt something. So then my natural reaction is to go, well, you made me feel that. Right. Well, the antecedent happened, and there was a human being behind that probably, but there's a space between the antecedent and my emotional state. And there is part of us that allows ourselves to step into a feeling, or to have that feeling come upon us or well up within us. And again, that sounds so clinical and so cold, but I want to reframe that as it's where we really can be empowered in our own emotional wellness.
And it's not that we want to take on, I agree completely. It's not that we want to take on ownership from things that we don't need to. So I'm not suggesting to, if we go to the battered wife scenario, whether it's verbal, emotional, physical, whatever it is, we don't want her to then say, this is my fault. I shouldn't even be sad or mad. I probably deserve it. I'm the worthless one. I just keep making him so angry. He has to mistreat me. So we're not saying that boat either. That's the other extreme. But rather a recognition and acknowledgement. My husband's words hurt me, and I'm really sad about it. So there's the antecedent, the reality. He was mean. He was difficult. He said some things that hurt. And I am sad. Not he makes me sad. I am sad because that's an appropriate response to the antecedent, to the anger, to the abuse. And so these are semantics. It's also systemic, but it's super important. And as I work with so many people who've been through so many difficult things, it just keeps bringing laser focus to my own therapeutic interventions with folks to help them not sink into the victim mentality, even though they were a victim, but not to sink into the victimization of it for like the remainder of their life or the remainder of the season, whatever this is. So they're important. I got a bunch more, but give me some more feedback to that.
Well, I guess I wanted to hear a little bit of your antecedent in terms of what has been bringing this up for you. I know, obviously, to be completely confidential with any, but are there certain issues you keep hearing, or certain ways of framing the world, viewing the world, that you're seeing clients getting stuck? Yes, like you said a moment ago, you were not at fault for how this happened. However, now because these situations keep happening, you're now stepping into and identifying and owning a victim standpoint. Is that what you're
it's
saying?
yes, absolutely. It's half and half. Half of this is from the clients I work with in trauma recovery, so that's significant.
Mm-hmm.
And there's specific ones there. The other half are students,
Mm.
and all the students I work with as a professor, but also in mental health connection and coming alongside disciplinarians on campus or administrators on campus for crisis consultation in cases. There's just a lot of things. Here's another phrase, Karen. Let me just keep giving some phrases as we weave them through.
Yeah, because I just like a concrete example whenever possible without obviously violating any confidentiality concerns. Because when we concretize it, I like that word, it just gives that touchstone. Because you and I can go kind of in the esoteric, and I want to make sure that the listener's going, oh yeah, no, that's a good example. And then from that example, they can generalize to examples in their world or their own personal experience.
And it's not just students. It's not just that generation. I think we struggle with this in general, but there's a gut response to things of people just saying things like, I can't do this.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I have a lot of students who midterms came out a couple weeks ago, right before spring break. A lot of students were doing poorly. It might have been the worst semester I've had as far as students failing or getting really low Ds at midterm. Mm-hmm. And, I try to meet with each one of those then after we get back and talk through a game plan for recovering the best they can. Some can recover to a C, some might be able to get all the way up to a B or A. It'd take a lot of work, but it could happen. And often, though what I'm suggesting isn't difficult, they'll simply get into a defeatism mode right away. I can't do this. And so I'll often say, can't do what?
Right.
Well, I can't do this amount of work. I said, yeah, you could. You could do them right now. If we stopped talking and you spent 5 hours on it, you'd get half of it done right now. So if you're saying I can't do this, what does that mean? Often it means I don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. It feels like overwhelming. It feels like too much. Mm-hmm. Right. And so there's that mindset we have, whether it's in our academics with students, it's whether a workout plan, right? Where someone could say, I just can't get to the gym regularly. Yes, you could. Do you decide to or not? Right. What are the choice theory? Glasser's work, what are the choices you're making and why? And I'm sure you've told students something similar in the beginning of a semester. I often say things like, every single person here is capable of getting an A if you choose to. Mm-hmm. Right? My classes do not include difficult statistics and research that others in the psych would make it a little different as far as who had the capabilities to maybe get an A or not. The majority of mine is simply doing the work, engaging, participating, studying for the quizzes, do the final presentation with engagement and connection. You can earn an A. But some people immediately hear that, as did I for my academic career a long time, and just immediately say, nope, I can't get it. I can't get an A. I can't do this. In the work scenario with like adults, I often hear things like constantly saying, I just don't want to go to my job today. And people could say, what's wrong about that? Because you've now put the entire day, you're going to likely go anyway, but you put the entire day in this negative perception for your mind, soul, and heart that you don't want to be there. Mm-hmm. And when we don't want to be somewhere and we fully acknowledge that and sink into that, we are not going to be as effective. We're not going to do as good of a job. We're not going to be as collegial with our teammates in the office or in the scenario. So I'm not saying don't acknowledge that you don't want to go, but quickly shift it. I don't want to go, but hey, this is my job. I'm responsible. I'm committed. I got an opportunity to go to work, make some money, be involved, help and bless and encourage others. So I think so much of it is what we phrase over ourselves, how that wraps into identity, wraps into motivation, wraps into movement. So I just gave you multiple angles without a specific concrete example other than some academics or some work-related scenarios.
Well, okay. So 2 things come to mind. One is Carol Dweck's mindset.
Okay.
And the power of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And there's a ton of research on this. Her book's fantastic. Dan loved it so much. I read it because I was doing when I was still teaching full time. I'd come across some of her research and I was sharing with it in my developmental classes. Okay. And then I read her book because she does academic research, but then she also wrote a book that would be appropriate for anyone, for the lay person. And Dan loved it so much, he bought it for each of his kids. And the fixed mindset is I can't do it, or I'm good at this and I'm bad at that. Mm-hmm. Whereas a growth mindset is, oh, this is challenging. Mm-hmm. This is not something I'm used to doing. It's uncomfortable. It's awkward, as the kids like to say. But I'm all about growing. So it's kind of exciting to try something new and then to be able to show myself what I could do. So there's a lot to that, which I think is applicable to what you're talking about. And when you recognize that framework and go, that if you lock into something along these lines, like a mindset framework, and you go, oh, what I just said in my head right there, that's a fixed mindset, as opposed to a growth mindset. And all the research shows that we're happier and emotionally healthier if we adopted a growth mindset. The other thing that made me think when you're talking about going to work or going to work out or trying to go to school when you're not in the mood is the whole ACT thing. And we've talked about this before, which is we identify and clarify our chosen values. And then we hold those up as this is my value. So maybe the value is like, I don't love my job, but I do want to provide for my family. I do want to make some money to pay my bills. Or maybe the value is, I don't really feel like going to this party, but I also have a value that I do want to connect with other people and people that I do want to make sure that I am having my support system in place. And that's impossible if I don't interact with humans at some point. Or the chosen value of school, like this class is really hard or it seems overwhelming, but I do have a value that I want to not waste my parents' money for this tuition or whatever the value is, or that I actually kind of do want to learn something. That could be a value too, although maybe it isn't someone's value, and that can be problematic if that isn't their value, then it is going to be harder. But Stephen C. Hayes talks about we identify that value, we recognize that it is it's my choice. So I'm not feeling forced to do something I don't want to do. I've chosen that this is my value. And then we do what everybody has to do. We sometimes have to push through the resistance, push through the discomfort, push through the part that's just, I'm tired and I just want to stay in bed because that's my value I chose. And so if I chose that, then I need to make sure that I am intentional and disciplined with my behaviors and my thoughts to make sure I'm moving toward that chosen value.
And when we push through, sometimes we can't go from fixed to growth. And sometimes we can't go from negative to positive. We at least need to go to neutral or open.
Okay.
So you're introverted and it's stressful and you got to go to this big party. And you can, again, you and I are both suggesting if you don't want to go, be free with yourself to admit that. I really don't feel like going. I really don't want to go. It's going to be a little bit nerve-wracking. But then if you know you need to go for various other concerns that are more important on the value chart, like you're just talking about value alignment, then you go, okay, I'm going to go. And then rather than maybe try to lie to yourself and say, I'm going to have an awesome time when you know you probably aren't, just don't sink into this is going to be awful. I'm going to dread every second of it. Because you keep telling yourself that and then think that the whole way there, you will have an awful time and it will be dreadful. But if you can get to neutral, I'm sure it's going to be decent. I'm sure it's going to be decent. I'll find a couple of people I like and can enjoy talking to. The snacks are going to be good, right? Find something to at least get neutral.
Right.
And with the job scenario, right? I don't really want to go to work. I really don't like this. I don't even like some of the people. But I'm going to be open today. I'm going to go there and at least try to be positive in myself and positive to others and try to bless some people and encourage them, even if I am frustrated, and even if I know I really need to look for another job soon. But why hate this job and dread it for the next 6 weeks until I get a new job? Or why go in there and say, you know what, I'm going to be the biggest pain in the butt today back to somebody, right? You go into this mindset like, I'm going to go make someone's life harder today. And maybe you are going to, but it's going to make your life harder too. So it's not denying the emotions or denying the feelings, but it's quickly saying, I at least got to get aligned with my values and get to open or neutral. And they talk about what's harder, stopping the negative thinking or starting to think positively. It's harder to stop the negative. It's harder to stop these victimizations, these codependent phrases, to just have your natural reaction to something difficult and say, I can't do this. I don't want to do it. Well, it might be true that you don't want to. It might be true it's going to be difficult, like you said. But if we give ourselves that fixed mindset, that negative perception of the possibility, I hear people say this all the time, tomorrow's going to stink. How do you know? There's some hard things in there, some challenging things. Say that. Be honest. I'm not saying be dishonest to yourself. Tomorrow's going to be tough. But I'm looking forward to it because I got an opportunity to be better. I got an opportunity to work through this scenario, right? To immediately just not evaluate it and phrase it in such a perception of potential darkness and horrific emotional pain that we're predisposed then to go right into that or stay into that. And it'll come in your face, right? It'll come in your nonverbals. It'll come in your countenance and your demeanor.
And it's going to be a feedback loop. Like if you're going to this, let's say you're 9 to 5 and you walk in there with this crabby look on your face, you got this dark storm cloud over your head, metaphorically speaking, you're walking in there because you don't want to be there. And well, you're going to get back what you put out.
Yeah.
Of course you are.
And the energy now, the same thing, the energy we're giving off, the energy returned. I completely agree, Karen. I didn't mean to cut you off if you were going to.
No, people feel it. They sense it. And then it's like, well, yeah, look what you're spewing out to the world. What do you expect is going to come back to you? And that's something that's, like you said, it could be an energetic thing. I mean, again, something that we even are picking up. We pick up a lot of nonverbal cues, or like pheromones, for example. And there's a lot of research on attractive. Why do we find someone attractive? There's some sort of unconscious or subconscious, at least, sense that we're picking up and things like that. Who knows that there might be, we talk about a vibe, and I don't know. I don't want to delve too much into that because I don't understand the physics behind it, but there might be kind of just something that people pick up. I mean, we know that people's joy spreads.
Absolutely.
And yeah, if you can get to neutral at least, but I mean, try to think of a time, like I always go back to, this may be a corny example, so I don't mean to minimize anyone's pain, but I remember 8th grade, everyone was having all these big end of the year parties, because we're graduating 8th grade and we're going to go to high school next year. And some of them, I was really uncomfortable. You know, I was not queen popular. I was not like just an outsider. I mean, our school was too small. Everyone was everyone knew. But, you know, I wasn't always in 8th grade super confident about going and mixing it up. And I remember a couple of the parties, I was like, I'm going to go. The first one, for sure. I was like, I'm going to go. I'm not going to have any fun. Just said that. I'm not going to have any fun. And you know what? I had a horrible time. And then because I'm Simon Anderson's daughter, I realized that this is no way to approach a party. If you want to have fun, you don't walk in there with like, it's going to be horrible. And so I just I went to neutral, and then I went to like, you know what if I just walk in, big smile, and then just try to just put out energy, a little fake it till I make it. I didn't feel that fully 100%, but I wasn't being inauthentic because I was trying to be that. And I presented myself, smile, laughing, had a great time. And that continued to happen. It's something I've carried with me. I know, again, you know, maybe 8th grade example doesn't, but I'm thankful that I learned that early. And then the other thing I want to say, and Elliott, this is the piece that I think is very hard, but it's such a useful life hack as well. If you are uncomfortable, do you think you're the only one uncomfortable? If this is a novel situation for many people, there's at some party or some gathering at some event, or someone else is uncomfortable. How about you go in there and you look for the person who's got their food and their little drink, and they're just sitting there looking like, I don't know if, I mean, the kid in the cafeteria is sitting by themselves. I mean, now people pull out their phones, so they don't have that feeling. But we used to be like, oh, I'm going to the cafeteria. I don't know anybody. My friends, they have a class this hour. So look for someone else and maybe put your own emotional angst aside and think, can I be a blessing to someone here who maybe is feeling even more uncomfortable than me? I'm sorry if that seems really preachy, but
no. And I think you hit one point again, referring to our dad and our mom in the context of how they overcame their difficult backgrounds, that a lot of these messages and this framing in this context of energy and reflection is passed down. If you grew up in a highly critical, negative, complaining family system, that does impact you, and you're going to have to kind of, you know, learn to rephrase and rethink some of those messages and what that looks like, and the self-labeling involved. Like you and I have talked about this too. Like, I'm just so awkward. I'm just so anxious all the time, right? You're labeling, and your body's going to follow suit and be more anxious and be more awkward. Rather saying things that might be still true. I get a little uncomfortable in big situations. Sometimes I feel some awkwardness around new people. That's the same thing without labeling yourself or saying, I am this. If you're going to be labeling anything, we want to be in the positive. I am a good, confident, strong person. And in my case, I could say, I am super social. So I'm going to let my extroverted energy help me carry through any of the awkwardness of this potential situation. So now we're taking things we know and feel good about and put them into the scenario that maybe feels a little awkward or difficult. I don't remember my 8th grade very much enough to know about the parties or that scenario, but I appreciate your point, because there is a certain self-identification.
I remember your 8th grade party.
What's that?
You and Sean, and you were being Larry Bird and he was being Magic, and you had a big old party. And I think you got a Tweety Bird, didn't you, from somebody?
I had end of the year 7th grade, end of the year 8th grade birthday party.
Yeah.
but that was just all guys. So I was thinking you were in the context more of guys and girls, social connection.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of that. But I just remembered your Tweety Bird.
Those were fun thing with the guys, which was not nearly as potentially uncomfortable as it could be with a bunch of girls. But the other thing, Karen, is then the labeling piece of this, right? You get a bad grade on a test and you say, I suck. I'm stupid.
Mm-hmm.
No, I did poorly on this test. You can evaluate it accurately without labeling yourself something that's going to super impact how you feel about your next class or next quiz coming up or next test you're coming up, right? That's like I'm anxious versus I have some anxiousness sometimes. Very different statements. I'm stupid versus I didn't study and I didn't do as well on this one, right? There's just such minutia here, but I think it's hugely important in what we're speaking over ourselves. And that's why the scriptures are really, really clear about how we are supposed to identify and how we're supposed to stay strong in our positivity and what is pure and holy and righteous and good, because it's very, very influential. It doesn't mean we're not acknowledging weakness, right? I need to do better. I need to study more next time because I didn't do as well as I wanted on this test and it frustrated me. That's a great statement. Not, I'm stupid. I can't do this. I suck. I'm going to fail the class.
So you're seeing this with quite a few of your students.
Very much so.
They just making global statements based on one assessment.
Very quickly, yeah. And I've asked some one of the guys who hasn't got to a lot of classes, missed a bunch, and obviously it's impacting his grade. And I was talking to him about, he asked me, can I make up some work? I said, sure. If you start coming to class every time and you're on time and you get the assignments done on time, hasn't happened once since. I laid out a very positive, easy scenario to walk through and still hasn't happened. And so it's just a scenario of something's mentally blocking him or something there, because I think his desire to do better is there, but something is blocking what's right in front of him as potential to simply start improving the situation, the methodology, the motivation, the discipline.
Well, now that you say that, I'm wondering if it would be a useful exercise to do some ACT in the very first class session.
Yeah,
to
I
say,
agree. I think it would be.
What are your values around this class? I mean, it can be more global in life, but as it pertains to this course, what are your values? Me, I was always like, I'm getting an A. Some people are like, I'm shooting for C, and that's cool. All right, fine. But just identify, and then, even share that maybe in a small group context or share that with the professor, and then when they come at the midterm and go, I'm not liking where I am, you can go, let's pull out your values and let's see, here's what you've stated is your goal. Is this still your value? Is this still your goal? And let's look at your behaviors. Are they in line with that? Or are they not? Are they taking off
a little incidental contract work with self?
Yeah.
Right, which a lot of my classes do. This particular one doesn't, but I think in that context, like in trauma class, for example, I tell the students, you're going to feel some trauma responses because we're talking about trauma for, 16 straight weeks.
Yeah.
And so to recognize up front, this is going to take place. Another interesting one, Karen, is with the grad students. And a lot of our grad students preparing to be counselors are straight from our undergrad up to the master's, which is great. And it's quite typical. But it's funny how many of them tell me things like, I'm not experienced enough. And I'm like, of course you're not. You can't go be a counselor until you have your master's. So you can't be experienced.
Right.
Well, how am I ever going to get a job if I don't have experience? I'm like, you can't get the experience until you get the job. Right. You can say I'm a good counselor, quote unquote, to my friends. That's not the same as a therapeutic intervention where you're being paid for your knowledge, experience, and service. Right. And so just trying to help those students reframe it and say things like, I look forward to getting some experience. And rather quit acting like this is a default for their life at the moment. Like they're one down now. There is occasionally master's students that are doing casework or something similar enough that they're getting a little bit of counselor experience, and they're 35 or 40 years old. So they have a lot more life experience. But with multiple of our younger counselors to be, I've really drilled down on this. And I said, quit making this experience identification a weakness of your potentiality of how good of a counselor you're going to be. And I was just talking to one of them yesterday who's now into his internship fully, and he's rocking it and he's killing it. And at the end of our little conference call yesterday, he wanted to ask me about a particular couple of hard cases, some kind of fun, supervisor work, even though I'm not a supervisor. And at the end I said, hey, how's the experience going? And he knew what I was saying. He goes, it's good. And I said, it's a lot better than you thought, isn't it? And he goes, yeah. And I said, now you're getting experience. So now you have this experience to draw back on. And even one client to another client, right? We start doing, remember as a young therapist, it is a little nerve wracking.
Totally.
Yeah. It's people got major issues they're bringing you and you're like 25 years old. You're trying to walk through it. So it's worthy of it. I wasn't trying to make fun of him, but it was fun to hear him on the other side. And now he's getting the experience he needs. So when the internship's done, I'm very confident and he's very confident. I'm ready for this. I'm ready to get my full-time gig.
Yeah. So I'm just hearing that it's, again, no surprise. We're talking about CBT, take charge of your thoughts, take charge of your life, and people having an unwillingness to take charge of their thoughts or not really recognizing the power of taking charge of your thoughts, which is, of course, is in line with
and I'm
the
just
Bible.
adding to it, Karen, take charge of your words.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just want to say, I think I'm just adding of
not just in your head, you're saying.
Yeah, not just the thoughts in your head, but the words that you're saying in your head and then that you say out loud. And so with trauma recovery, I'm never going to get over this. Why would you want to say that? You're not going to forget it. Your spouse tragically dies or something like that. Of course, you're not going to forget it. But why would you say I'll never get over it? Are you? Maybe that's partially just identifying the significance of the pain, which all of us would go, understandable. That's terrible. Super sad. Rather, I'd say this is going to be really hard to get over. That's okay. That's not putting a determinant movement on us. It's so subtle, Karen, but I've just seen it dramatically. Which of my clients get through these awful, horrific things and seem to make some movements and steps along the way? And which ones a year and a half in, I'm not sure they're any better at all. And a lot of it has to do with the thoughts, the words, the identifications, the labeling. And if I did a bunch of analysis and research, I would guess, going back into family of origin, a lot of that's already been imprinted and stamped on. So that work is harder. Our imprint and plant was to do all the things we're doing. So that makes it much easier. Doesn't mean the next generation of kids, for all of us, haven't wrestled again on their own and they have to figure out ways to do that.
Well, another thing that comes to mind is the idea, the Bible, and you're going to know the verse better but whatever is good, whatever is pure, whatever is...
Yeah, Philippians.
Think on these things. Now, we're not saying, we'll reiterate, because I think it needs to be said over and over again so that we don't sound callous or that we want you to just shove and repress and not. But, you think about someone who's gone through something traumatic, like a spouse dying. There may be times when that word from Scripture is what one needs to do, because sometimes we need to ruminating over and over and over. We've talked about this, is the research shows is related to depression. And I think that was something I learned at a conference when I was in graduate school. And I remember at that time I was still kind of steeped in like processing everything to the nth degree. And that there's a place for that to a point. But then I was realizing, and this is why this statistic stuck with me, or this research study, I was like, oh, I've moved from processing to ruminating at this point. And it was from breakup stuff in my 20s and all that. And I'm like, oh, I'm definitely ruminating. And so realizing that maybe sometimes we've processed and maybe we set a clock and we give ourselves that 15 minutes or that half hour, whatever. We journal this. We're going to be in this. We're going to acknowledge it. We're going to validate our own emotional experience. And then we're going to go to what Scripture says. Now it's time to think about good things. Certainly, because we can then elevate our mood based on our thoughts. We know that. And we can also get a break. We need an emotional break so that we aren't so overwhelmed. When we a lot of times clients are flooding because they're having a hard time just like getting a little distance from the pain. And I'm not saying this is easy. I'm just trying to provide some kind of practical strategies, because letting that happen is not going to be healthy in the long run.
Yeah. And there's a reason Scripture teaches us over and over again to be thankful for all things. Because that's really hard to do. How do you be thankful that your husband left you? How to be thankful that...
thankful in all things, right? Isn't there a distinction there, Pastor?
It is, and you're just beating me to it. And so it talks about, James says, count it all joy in trials and tribulation. right? So it's
Yeah.
like, wow, how am I counting this joy? Well, the joy is in the dependency in the Father and trusting in community and building perseverance. And so these aren't like esoteric, philosophical, manipulations. They might feel that way, but when we're thankful in the midst of the craziness, and when we're working very intentionally on the language and words and not ruminating on the bad things, actually ruminating on the good, and recognizing that the harder things in life tend to be the ones that grow us and make us better, not the easier ones.
That's exactly right.
So like,
yeah.
If we can kind of sink into those truths, that can help us kind of shift. And for a lot of couples in recovery, in the marital aspect of recovery, it's teaching them new language together. Right. And getting away from the overgeneralizations. Relations. You always do that. Right. And rather saying, hey, this happens a lot. Total different phraseology that changes the dynamic of the conversation when there's defensiveness and hurt and pain and cycles of toxic conflict that just keeps working against us. And even affirming each other's emotional points, even if we don't always like the emotional point, affirming them, like if our husband or wife is overly critical and overly negative and tends to kind of be an Eeyore in that kind of reference of personality. So to affirm their emotional part and then gently, graciously show other side or other perspective. And yeah, it's true that party was challenging tonight, but there was also some good conversations. When you get in the car and your husband or wife says something like, that party sucked. It was awful. It was a waste of time. Right? What do we normally try to do? We try to convince them it wasn't. Yeah. Rather than saying, man, you're right. It was tough. It was a difficult time, but I did have 2 good conversations and it was so good to see so-and-so again. So now you affirm them in their state. So you're not getting in an argument now about whether or not the party sucked. How does that help anything? But you can also point some other things out that might gently steer and move the conversation back to at least neutrality. Right. And even if he or she then says something like, well, I wish we wouldn't have gone. Say, I understand that, hon, but I'm kind of glad we did. And thank you for going. Because I did get some good connections, even though it wasn't quite as good as I liked. And right. It sounds like this is extremely hard to do. It's hard to start to change interactions like this. But once you get the hang of it and kind of get moving in it, it can be really, really positive and quickly life altering. In our perspective, our mood, our mindset, and then influence.
It becomes your new default mode. So it's not so hard to get yourself into that place of neutrality from the negativity or the place of positivity when you're at least like you said, if you run around town with this cloud over your head and the Eeyore mentality, the victim mentality, then it's a big ask. It's a big effort to get yourself even to neutrality. But and I think the analogy of going to the gym and starting those first 10 push-ups are going to be brutal when you haven't worked out in a long time. And it's very similar. Like your mindset, it has a lot of similarities to a muscle. It's not a muscle, obviously, but rewiring, and now we're going to get to the neurological side, rewiring those pathways so that your neurons are in their default mode, firing in a positive direction. That's where the empowered approach to life comes in, and you make it so much easier to see the glass is half full, or to find that joy even in the darkness, or to reframe, this is a really painful season, but I know God's got something good for me because He is a God who restores. So there, and like you said a moment ago, we don't learn from the mountaintop. We wish we did, but we don't. So to try to find something positive. And one other thing, when you're talking about trauma, and you mentioned a spouse dying, but I'm thinking if someone has been perpetrated, there's been a perpetrator involved in the trauma. One thing that, and I don't know if this would be useful, but I know what I've thought about in times when I have been stewing and been upset about something. I realize that if there's a person involved and they've harmed me, I went to the extent that I still remain in victim mentality. They still have power over me. I'm still giving them my power, and I'm just like, two older brothers and youngest child, like, no, you're not going to get my power. I'm taking it back. Like, I would invite people to consider looking at the sassy part of you is like, you know what? You're not stealing my joy. You're not, you took something horrible from me.
You robbed me already. You're not going to rob me now.
That's it. That's something that comes to mind for me, where it's like, no. I went through something because you're a horrible person and you are evil and all that is true. And guess what? You did that to me as a child. You're not doing that. You're not taking my joy. You're not taking my power. I'm not giving you any power in my adulthood.
The language,
Not saying that that's easy.
No, it's not easy, but it is really helpful. That's one of those mantras you got to train your body to do.
Yeah.
And what I use with victims of like rape and assault is things like, you took my past, you're messing with my present, but you are not taking my future.
Yeah.
Because we got to admit they're messing with the present, because that's why they're seeing me. They wouldn't be seeing me if they weren't. So we're admitting that, but we are gaining that strength, and you will not get to dictate my future and to have that energy and that excitement. And we all know, we use the workout scenario because that's an easy one, but we all know, gosh, I don't want to go today. Just get your butt up, get there and start. 99 out of 100 times, it'll actually be pretty good. And Woody Allen, I hate to give Woody Allen credit for this.
Oh, yeah.
But show up. Just show up.
90% of life is just showing up,
just
right?
Show up. Be present with self. I like to say show up to self. Just be present and show up to what your values are, circling all the way back to how we started.
Yeah.
What are the values? I made the decision I wanted to work out. I'm the one who said I wanted to do this. I wanted to commit to it. So I'm going to commit to it. I'm going to do it, even if I don't feel like it, even if I don't want to get out of bed. Just show up to self, show up to the present, and don't allow anybody or anything outside the Lord to direct your future.
And all this rhetoric about self-love. What is the most self-loving thing? Not to sit there and give yourself a pass, but to actually continue to move toward your chosen values.
That's right.
Thank you, Stephen C. Hayes. Give
Challenge
him all
yourself
the credit
to be the best you. And we would say the you that the Lord has created you to be.
I love it, Elliott. Good stuff. Why don't you
let's pray
us out and help us all do exactly what we've talked about, because you and I need it too.
Absolutely, for sure. And reminding ourselves as we remind others, that's what teaching is really, right? By the time I get to my Sunday morning sermon, I'm so strong and passionate already about, I just studied justification for 12 straight hours. I'm on it. I'm ready. Now I want to make sure and then it helps me grow, helps you grow. And we move forward. Sanctification this week. We're doing a doctrinal word series. And the Sunday you're there, it's regeneration of the Holy Spirit. Since you're going to help lead us with worship that day, so you can think through how that
You better
fits.
give me some Cliff's notes on that.
Well, the Waymaker's perfect, right? That's a great song you chose. We want to do that one. Yeah. Because we're talking about here we go, right? Here's the perfect fit for the story. What is the Lord? And who's his identity I can grab onto? He's the Waymaker. He's the miracle maker, right? It's all those things right there that we hold on to that and then allow that to, what does the Lord say about us? We're fearfully and wonderfully made, right? Even in our mother's womb, he knew us and designed us. I mean, to all of that, I'm labeling myself as a child of God. I am identifying as a child of God, an adopted son, an equal heir with Christ, scripture says. So am I going to live as if I'm a royal son of Jesus, or am I going to live as a defeated victim? Can't do it. I got to live in the light, live in the truth. So Lord, thank you for this time. Thank you for an opportunity to talk through the client, Lord, or the listener who sent the question that we were able to affirm and bless and encourage. We're thankful, Lord, and look forward to others that come in. Continue to pray blessing over her and her family in all the different areas. And Lord, we thank you for the power of words, the power of your word, and that your word, the Bible, does tell us how important our thinking is, how important our identification is as your child, your son, your daughter. Believing in you and believing in self, even though we have a sin nature. Believing in our opportunities to align our values with our thinking and to change negative patterns of determination, of victimization, and rumination of abuse and sadness, and focusing on all the difficult, negative things of life rather than the positive ones, and the growth mindset Karen talked about to help us to embrace some of the challenges and embrace the things in front of us that seem hard rather than immediately saying, I can't do it. This stinks. I don't want to do it. Lord, give us a spirit of victory. Give us a spirit of strength. Lord, bind the evil one from his influence. He wants us to be fearful. He wants us to be divided, to be living in the darkness. And your word says we have to bring it into the light. So help us to acknowledge and love you and love others with your love. And to even, Lord, love to embrace life, even the challenges, difficulties, recoveries from trauma and hurt and pain and sadness, and minister to others in and with those trials and tribulations, to be thankful in those difficult periods and seasons. We thank you, Lord, for this time to share from your word, share from our experience and background. Pray a blessing over all the listeners. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Love and Life with Dr. Karen and Pastor Elliott is produced by Tim May and executive producer, Dr. Karen Anderson-Abel. For more information about Love and Life, please go to loveandlifemedia.com.